Well, hey YouTube, it's Eric again. I'm usually on my bike when I make these videos, but tonight I am here in the bike room, as you can see. Some of my collection back here. And I'm also here tonight with my new Pentax 17 or Pentax 17, which I think is kind of the more cool way of saying it. I ordered this the day they were announced from B&H Photo. That was last Thursday. It arrived yesterday, which was Wednesday, so it took about 6 days to get here. On the way, it's always kind of fun to watch the tracking as these things go across the country and see some of the interesting places that your package ends up going through when it's on the FedEx truck. I'm guessing, just based on the progress of the camera from East Coast to West Coast, we're here in California, that it was on a truck the whole way. And probably the most interesting place was the night before it made its way to California. It stayed in a little place called Colville, Utah, which is really interesting. A tiny little place way out in the middle of nowhere, off east of Salt Lake City. Anyway, who knows? Maybe truck driver had relatives there or something. Anyway, I wanted to share some thoughts about the camera. I've had it for a couple days now. I've put 2 rolls of film through it. I put a lot of those pictures on Instagram already, and I'll put a link to that down in the description. But I think I've had enough time with the camera to get at least a beginning feel for what it's about. I'm not going to go through all the specs and everything. I think you all know the basics. It's a half-frame camera. Pentax's first new film camera in about 20 years. It's an automatic camera in terms of exposure. You have to set the focusing on it. They call it zone focusing, which is something I'm very used to doing. I've got a lot of older cameras that do nothing at all for you. They don't autofocus, they don't auto expose, they don't do anything. So for me anyway, that's really kind of second nature and not a big deal. A lot of people are worried about, oh, you know, is it too hard to zone focus? All your shots are going to be out of focus. I haven't had a problem with that at all. But looking at it from the standpoint of someone who's just read the instructions and focused the camera the way they tell you to, you shouldn't have pictures that don't come, you know, that everything you take should be pretty close to in focus. And you'll see in the examples that I'll have here in a few minutes, they're in fact very sharp and just amazingly sharp in some situations. So a few just initial overall thoughts about the camera, which I paid $499 for plus tax to B&H. No, I'm definitely not sponsored for any of this. It's a nice looking camera. I guess the expression is it feels good in the hand. It does feel nice. Some of the parts, I mean, compared to like some of the Leicas that I have, obviously it's not a Leica. It doesn't have that level of sophistication, but it's a very nice little camera. It does a lot of things really well. It is rather easy to use. The loading is easy. Setting the film ASA, all that, taking pictures is easy. It takes a little time to figure out what the blinking lights are in the back. When you try and take a picture, it'll start throwing some blinking lights at you. That can be a little hard to learn just at the beginning, but you get the gist of that pretty quickly. One nice thing that it does is if you leave the lens cap on, because you're not looking through the lens, you're looking through the viewfinder, so you're looking at your scene not knowing that the lens cap is on, it'll blink at you. There's 2 little LEDs back here and they just go crazy, both of them blinking at the same time, and eventually it sinks in, oh, I need to take the lens cap off. Then you can take your picture. One thing I think is interesting, and I've seen this mentioned by one other person online, I think Kaiman Wong mentioned that in his video about the camera. He was joking that the 17 in the name might refer to the number of finishes on the camera. Which is a valid just comment, and I'm not sure why they did this. There's not 17 different finishes, but there are at least 4 major different finish treatments on this camera. The front is a leatherette. It's actually that feels to me like it is a leatherette that's applied to the camera, like most cameras were, you know, back in the day, and probably still today. On the back is a diamond pattern where the lines are running diagonally and making little diamonds. The hand grip up here that encloses the battery has a square hatching pattern where the lines run vertically and horizontally. And then of course the top and bottom are made of what Pentax says is a magnesium alloy. Now I can't tell, and I'm not going to try and start scraping stuff off, if this is an integral color of that magnesium material. Can't tell. It could be. But it's just interesting that they chose to have so many different kinds of things going on. I don't know if they were thinking on the back here, give it a different texture for grip, which doesn't make any sense because your fingers are gripping on the front and the back at the same time. It's interesting. I don't know if you can see here, if the camera will focus that closely, but there is a lip around the edge of that diamond patterned area that kind of wraps around to the sides here that almost looks like they meant to cut out a piece of this adhesive leatherette and put it on the back, but then they didn't. Otherwise, why wouldn't that be flush with everything else? I don't know. I'll talk at the end of the video about filters, but just one other quick thing. I mentioned the LEDs back here, which are, you know, very helpful in most situations once you figure out what they all mean. Taking shots at night, because I tried that, and I've taken a whole bunch of pictures, taken about 70 pictures in the last couple of days with the camera. The LEDs are generally helpful, but at night they're not. You'll see a picture that I took with flash after dark last night, and when I was looking through the camera, trying to look through the viewfinder, it gives you a red LED back here. The top LED glows bright red when the flash is charged and ready to fire. Now, unfortunately, that LED is really bright, and at night when it's dark and you're trying to look through the viewfinder, you can't see anything except that bright red light. So just be aware of that. I tried putting my finger over the LED to block the light and then try and look through what was left of the viewfinder. It didn't really work. The light just kind of bled through into the viewfinder. So not at all a problem during the day or bright situations, but definitely at night you're going to have a problem with that. Really quickly about the mode dial. I've seen one review, and believe me, I've looked at a whole bunch of videos about the camera, where someone complained that as they were advancing the film, that their finger was also touching the mode dial and moving it. I haven't had that happen to me. One other quick thing about the design of the camera, and I've heard other people mention this, actually maybe a couple of things, and they're both to do with the grip. The grip really, to me, looks like it was sort of added on at the end. I'm sure they designed this whole thing as an entirety. I mean, looking at their videos about how they went through the process of coming up with the camera, I'm sure that was not done as an afterthought, but it really kind of looks like it. Almost like, oh my God, we need a battery. Where are we going to fit that in the body of this camera? And, well, there's no place, so let's put it over here. It's nice to hold on to, but it just sort of looks like it was added on. It's hollow, and that's probably the most plasticky feeling part of the camera, is that hollow grip. And then the last thing about that is the screw that holds it on. It's large and it sticks out over the edge, so you can feel that thing, you know, when you're just kind of moving your hands around the camera. When you take the grip off, the screw comes out, and it just comes out and it's laying there all by itself. Somebody is going to lose one of these. I would not be surprised if at some point they offer a replacement screw that is maybe smoother and flatter and doesn't stick out that much. Maybe that, maybe an entire new battery door where the screw is both connected to the door and somehow more flushly mounted into that plastic piece. It's just a plastic piece that comes off. It would be not that hard for someone to actually, if you wanted to, you could probably just 3D print something like this that has a more flush appearance over here. So, as I mentioned, I've taken a bunch of pictures. Let's take a look at those, and I'll kind of go through my thoughts on what the results are that I've gotten. So to start off with, I did process the film myself here at home. Shot that first roll on Kodak Gold 200. Now I metered it at 160, which the camera lets you do. That's a kind of a recommended speed for Kodak Gold to get a little more color and pop out of it. So I did that. Processed it in Cinestill's C41 2 chemical kit. Did all that processing, scanned it at home here on my Epson V550 scanner. When I did the scanning, I did as I usually do for Kodak Gold, which means I bumped up the saturation just a bit, put that at 20, put the unsharp masking at high because of the smaller negative size. I wanted to kind of pull as much detail as I could out of the negatives. Left everything else pretty much where it is. I shot these at a resolution of 3200. The other thing that I learned in processing the negatives, which was interesting, is that, and I've had this happen on half-frame negatives before, if you scan with the V550 and with many other scanners, it's going to look for frames. It's going to look for standard 35mm frames, which is going to get you 2 images in the half-frame format. What that does though, and it's more an issue on color than it is on black and white, is you end up with 2 color images with a black bar running down the middle of them. And what I've found is that black bar throws off the scanner. It tries to include that kind of in the mix when it's looking at the colors and deciding how to expose each of those images. So for initial scanning and just to kind of get everything off the film and onto the computer, I do the fine frames and I shoot and I scan diptychs basically. When I want the pictures that I'm really going to be looking at and sharing, I go back in and I scan them individually, and now I'm not dealing with that black bar. So that's just a little bit of how I go through my workflow here to get the negatives scanned in and onto the computer. So some pictures I just took. I put a roll of 24 exposure Kodak Gold in the camera, which meant I got 48 frames. And I went out and shot those in about an hour or 2. Took my bike out, went off to lunch. On the way, stopped by one of my favorite mid-century modern shopping centers near here and just took some pictures that showed, colors and images, and tried to get a whole variety of shots here. 4th of July is coming, so there's a 4th of July stand. There's the sign at the El Camino Plaza, which I just love. Like the red truck here, a couple different ways of looking at the red truck. I love the palm trees at this center. And I was very pleased with the way the pictures came out. Especially, I think, given that it's 200 speed film, the grain is a little bit finer than some of the ones you'll see in a few minutes that I shot on Tri-X today. So I was very pleased, but the focusing and the exposure was just very good across all these images. I was very surprised. Now, most of these are just shot at infinity, so especially on a bright day where your aperture is going to be closed down, almost everything's going to be in focus. But even when we got inside, so here's a coffee place I stopped at for lunch, and I set the distance at about 10 feet, which is more or less about how far this was away. And pretty much everything in here is in focus. It's also, I think, very nicely exposed. There's a bright window in the back there, and then there's the overhead light. But I think the camera did a really good job of compensating for both of those. Now this is inside at the place I had lunch. Now, for whatever reason, maybe because the windows are bigger here and brighter, it did expose for those windows a lot more than the interior, which starts looking a little bit dark. This is a shot of the ceiling in that restaurant in the same lighting, but here it's just looking at the lights coming off, the light coming off of the ceiling. So, you know, it did a better job exposing that. But still, this is one where I had to set the distance. So again, kind of, you know, just guesstimating the distance up to the ceiling and setting that on the camera, and it did quite a nice job. This is my lunch. This is my burrito bowl at Chipotle. I used the knife and fork, the food image selection on the lens, and it came out just fine. And then, and this is afterwards, back at the coffee place that I went to after lunch, I used the strap on the camera, which is a guide to where it focuses in the macro setting. And I put that right on the edge of this cappuccino and took a picture, and it just came out tack sharp. It was really amazing. And, you know, again, the exposure here I thought was just spot on. A few shots at home here, neighbors having something delivered, so you have a good balance here of kind of the shady area under the trees, the truck out in the daylight. All of that looks good. Here's our dog in some dappled sunlight under the tree out in the front yard, and again, you know, that all looked fine. This was one where I believe I'd have set it at infinity because she was a little bit more than 10 feet away from me, and everything, you know, seems to be nicely focused. Here's inside our garage, and again, just a lot of dynamic range from the sort of, you know, more subdued light inside the garage and reflecting off the cars, and then the bright area behind it. And I think the camera did a really good job of exposing both of those. Here's another macro shot of my little bicycle guy here on my desk. Again, used that the camera strap to figure out the distance to the camera, and it turned out just fine. This is the bathroom here down the hall. All the light here is coming in from that window that you see in the back. It's shining through the shower curtain. A somewhat difficult situation, but, you know, again, the camera did the exposure just fine. I guessed again the distance from myself to what I was photographing and set that on the lens, and it did just fine. This is inside using the flash. It's the back end of one of my bikes here in the bike room. So I took the camera out on my bike this morning, went for a ride, loaded some Tri-X into it, and got these shots. And I think they turned out quite well. They're obviously different. Well, they're black and white, first of all. The grain is much more apparent, obviously, than on the color pictures, because Tri-X is a much grainier film. Maybe a little more apparent than I would have liked in these images. Obviously, you know, you're zooming in twice as much as you would to a normal negative, so you're going to see the grain to a much greater extent. But I'm going to try again, like I said, with some FP4, finer grain film, see if that helps at all and gives just kind of a more pleasing image. As far as the pictures go, you know, there's no great art happening here. The first image, just street scene here, nice mid-century modern sort of classic Denny's over in Roseville, which is where I rode through. Nice shot. I like the picture of the goats that were munching on the weeds on the side of the road. I love the one goat that's sitting there in the middle of the frame down at the bottom, kind of resting in the grass and looking over at us. The thistle was something that I just thought, hey, that would be a good picture to see how, again, the focusing worked. So I, again, used the wrist strap, used the macro setting, and got a really nicely focused picture of that little thistle blossom. And then the last picture is of that tree, the same tree that our dog was playing in when it was light the day before. This is taken after dark. And a couple things here. This is the picture I was taking when I mentioned looking through the viewfinder and having that bright red flashlight shining in your eye. So it was hard to see what I was taking a picture of. Also, you get a feel for how the flash performs. The tree was about 10-15 feet away from me. It's exposed okay, but that's about it. That's about as far as the flash is going to go. So you're not going to get huge areas of coverage with the flash. It's just too small. Now the last thing I'll mention is about exposure and filters. Now the camera is designed so that the exposure meter, which sits there at the top of the lens, is behind where the filter sits. So if you put a filter on it, I put a UV filter here, the metering lens is still looking out through the filter and theoretically exposing with the filter in mind, so it's adjusting exposure to match whatever reduction in light that filter is creating. So with a UV filter here, it shouldn't be any different, but if you put an ND filter on, which I have, and I shot a few images with the ND filter on, it worked just fine. But the theory is that the camera compensates for the filter because it's looking through the filter when it exposes. That's not new to this camera. It's been done on all kinds of other cameras. There's not a major innovation that Pentax came up with for the 1.7. That's how cameras work. But if you read their manual, it talks about, it says using a colored filter or a filter with density can make it impossible to obtain the correct exposure, which I just think is interesting. And they go on, make sure to take some test shots in advance and use exposure compensation. So they seem to be saying that if I'm, say, using an ND filter on the camera, that I then need to compensate for that with the exposure compensation dial here, which is not the way it works. And they're saying if an exposure multiplying factor, etc., is required for a colored filter used with black and white film, compensation may not be possible in combination with the metering sensor. Okay, and they say make sure to take some test shots in advance. And they go on that multiple filters may cause vignetting in the metering range, etc., etc. Make sure to use only one filter with a thin edge, and that makes sense. You don't want a filter that, some filters have a very thick edge around them that goes into the filter and covers up part of the area that's within the ring of the filter itself. So I can definitely see that because the meter is right up there at the edge. You don't want to block it. Now, I have taken pictures with an ND filter on color and black and white film. They turned out just fine. You can't tell that they had an ND filter in them. I have a yellow filter, which I will put on the camera and take shots with the FP4 and just see how that turns out. I suspect that it'll turn out just fine. So I don't really know what they're talking about here when they're going in at such depth in here and cautioning you about using filters and having to compensate for exposure, because this is just how filters, I mean, cameras have been made like this since, gosh, I don't know, the 70s. Whenever people started putting exposure meters on cameras, at some point someone figured out, hey, if we put it behind the filter, the camera will compensate for that because it's going to be reading the light coming through the filter. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that. It's just my first chance to use the camera. I'm going to be taking it out a lot more for a lot more rides and taking pictures in a lot more places. So we'll see how those turn out. So check back at the at my channel here for more adventures. Again, I'll put my Instagram down in the description so you can find my photographs there. And as always, like and subscribe. Hit that, the like button. Comments are super welcome. Love to hear from any of you. If you have questions about the camera or what it's like to use it, happy to answer those. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye.